I'm so sick and tired of superhero films, and I'm not afraid to say it. The fatigue is real. I thought bright lighting and vibrant colors would fix it. I really did. For years, we've been squinting at superhero movies drowned in grays and dim lighting like they were trapped under this weird cinematic cloud of gloom. So naturally, after I saw these trailers for this new wave of superhero films, I was excited. But then I watched the new Superman film, and look, I wanted to love it. I really did. On paper, it is everything that I've been asking for. Brighter tones, a focus on hope, a return to basics, finally a Superman who smiles instead of looking grumpy whilst walking in slow motion. It felt like it was ticking every box on the superhero apology checklist, but instead it ended up feeling really goofy. And I know that's controversial considering how popular it is, but just hear me out on this. It wasn't just the tone, it wasn't just the jokes, it wasn't even just the painfully obvious green screen moments that looked more like a video game. It was that underlying feeling of this again? That creeping sense of no matter how bright the colors are or how deep the dialogue is, I've seen this movie before. I've seen it a dozen times, dressed up in slightly different costumes with slightly different logos slapped on the chest. And before people come after me for my opinion, just know that I'm not alone in this. In fact, Superman drastically underperformed at the box office, making it the third largest opening of this year, behind the Minecraft movie. Yes, the Minecraft movie! And this was before the whole chicken jockey fiasco. And yes, I know that having the third largest movie opening of the year sounds like a great thing, and usually it is, but not for a superhero movie. So far, Superman has made around $220 million during its opening weekend. $125 million of that came from the US, and $95 million came from international markets. That means that 55% of its earnings came from the US, and just over 43% of it came from overseas, which really isn't good. Even now, Marvel movies tend to earn more internationally than they do in the US, with China making up a huge sum of that box office. But that wasn't the case with Superman, and it's left studios absolutely baffled. They thought that Superman was gonna do exactly what Marvel had been struggling to do recently, and the fact that it hasn't speaks volumes. The problem is, superhero films just don't dominate the conversation anymore. They don't feel special, they just feel tired. Like a friend who overstayed their welcome at a party but just keeps insisting that they have one more funny story to tell. And no amount of recastings or brightly colored optimism is gonna change the fact that people just don't care about superhero movies like they used to. So that's what this video is really about. I want to figure out where it all went wrong. Why this genre, which once felt unstoppable, feels like it's clinging on for dear life. Why audiences aren't showing up anymore, and why it feels like everything peaked with Avengers Endgame. And most of all, I want to figure out if there's any hope left. Is Fantastic Four gonna turn things around? Am I being too critical, or are we naturally reaching the end of this superhero boom and we just need to accept it? The answers are not what you think, so strap yourselves in because this is about to get very, very messy. Over the past few years, I've been getting this reoccurring feeling, and I know you felt it too. I'll be sitting in the cinema, popcorn in hand, watching the latest superhero movie, and about an hour in, I get this creeping sense of deja vu. Not because I've seen this specific movie before, but because I've lived through this story 1,000 times already. The problem is that these superhero movies just seem to follow the exact same blueprint. Look, here we have the good guys that we root for. Let's add a little bit of humor, sprinkle in a villain with a vaguely understandable motivation, and it all leads up to a massive CGI fight in a city, or the sky, or in space, I guess. Oh, and spoiler alert, the good guys always win. Isn't that shocking? It's become so predictable to the point of parody, but that's not always a bad thing. We ate this predictable style up pre-2019, so I think the problem is much deeper than just surface level storytelling. The overwhelming opinion is that many people believe superhero films peaked with Avengers Endgame, which is funny because the name Endgame was almost foreshadowing it. That film felt like an ending, like it was closing a chapter, especially since a lot of the iconic characters ended with it. The hype around this movie was unlike anything I have ever seen, and when it ended, fans were left wanting and begging for more. But Avengers Endgame was the last of that Marvel phase. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. The problem was Marvel just had no idea where to go from here. They knew that they could never generate that much hype again with something new, so they decided to just repeat the same thing over and over again as many times as possible. And when I say that, I don't just mean predictable plot, I mean the exact same tone tone, the exact same arcs, the exact same character tropes, just with different people instead. They've taken everything that worked and tried to force it into these different movies where it just doesn't fit. The comedy aspect is a perfect example of this because Marvel were known to have these really funny one-liners throughout their films which audiences absolutely loved. Fast forward to now, and Marvel has been trying so hard to cram these jokes into their new movies, almost as if to say, hey, don't forget, we can still be funny too, but the end result is just so cringe. I mean, we all remember this one line.
So, Scooby-Doo this crap.
Scooby-Doo this crap.
Yeah, it's just not funny, is it? They are just so busy trying to replicate their past successes that they've forgotten how to actually surprise anyone. Take Deadpool and Wolverine, for example, which was Marvel's first really hyped movie in a while. I mean, come on, a movie following two fan-favorite characters, that was a golden ticket to do something new and exciting. But instead, they just played it so unbelievably safe that it felt like the plot was just stitched together from the leftovers of better movies. Oh look, here's a surprise cameo in slow motion. Oh, now here's another one. And another one. And another one. It felt like the film focused more on trying to get these crazy fan moments than actually having a decent story, and that's where I feel like these new films are going wrong. It's just all so predictable, and that is truly the best way I can describe it. Even James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy 3 wasn't immune to this. Now, don't get me wrong, this is by far the best Marvel film to come out since Avengers Endgame. I absolutely loved it, but still, it was emotional, sure, but structurally, it was still the exact same. Assemble the gang, go on a quest, save the universe, cue the slow motion walk with classic rock playing in the background. Again. For the past few years, Marvel has been absolutely exhausting, and they're not helping themselves by constantly pushing out these low-budget projects. I mean, just look at these green screens. How is anyone supposed to take you seriously? Fans were so fed up with Marvel at this point that when the news for the Superman reboot came around, people were so excited. When it comes to superheroes, Superman isn't just another IP, he's the blueprint. So on paper, this should have been the movie that would save the genre, right? Well, things didn't really turn out that way. Let's just rewind for a second and think about how we ended up here. So the superhero craze in the 2010s left a lot of studios struggling, but honestly, DC had one of the most public and embarrassing downfalls of all time. Whilst Marvel was riding high with back-to-back hits and building this massive interconnected universe, DC seemed to be tripping over its own feet, trying to catch up. They rushed into creating their universe without laying the proper groundwork, hoping that big names like Superman and Batman would be enough to compete. But instead of creating a solid foundation, they ended up with a messy, inconsistent franchise full of behind-the-scenes drama, polarizing creative choices, and movies that couldn't seem to agree on what tone they were going for. One of the biggest complaints during this era was Zack Snyder's take on Superman, mainly because he portrayed the character as darker, moodier, and more conflicted than the usual hopeful and optimistic Superman that people all knew and loved. Fans of the classic version felt like Snyder stripped away all the warmth and fantasy that made Superman so iconic, leaning too heavily into the stern and destruction side of things, especially in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. But not all hope is lost for the DCU, because now we have Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn coming in to save the day. For the people that were as confused as I was, apparently there's a new universe happening that exists outside of Robert Pattinson's Batman. Listen, I gave up trying to understand it a long time ago, so all you need to know is that basically it's a whole new world and just forget everything that you've seen before. So now James Gunn is in charge of trying to steer DC back on track, and for starters, everything was looking up. They were promising a Superman who's bright, hopeful, and wholesome again, basically going back to that classic optimistic version of the character. And honestly, that's probably the smartest move they could have made right now, because the world does not need another grumpy superhero wandering through a CGI apocalypse. If anything, people seem to want something more sincere and genuine these days. But, and it's a big but, sincerity alone isn't gonna cut it. You can't just throw a red cape on David Corenswet and expect everyone to suddenly care. Well, I mean, it did work on the girls who are now going to see the movie just because they think he's hot, so I guess there's that. But apart from that, you can't just blast the old theme song and hope hope people forgot about how many times DC's let them down before. Audiences aren't stupid, they've been through this many times before. At this point, they have major trust issues, and trying to get them to care again was gonna be a challenge. This is where I think they did well with bringing in James Gunn to direct, because although the fans had lost faith in DC, they trusted him as a director to make a good movie. So I did what a lot of people did and went into this movie maybe too optimistic, and well, I have a lot of thoughts. There are definitely things I liked about it, and I want to give credit where credit's due. I don't want this video to sound like I'm just trying to drag superhero movies for the fun of it, okay? I'm tired, not bitter. Firstly, I really appreciated that this Superman finally felt like Superman for once, and not some moody, depressed superhero who spends the entire movie looking like he's questioning every life choice he's ever made. This version had heart, and it leaned into the hopefulness that the character is meant to embody, and I've missed that. After years of superheroes trying too hard to be gritty and edgy, it was so nice to see a superhero just be a human again. However, in saying that, I almost feel like they tried to make him overly human to the point where it was just unrealistic. I'm sorry, but I just couldn't stand the fact that he kept getting beat up throughout the entire film, and I know that's such a weird thing to nitpick, but I just can't help it. Look, I get that he's supposed to be injured at the start of it, but come on, this is supposed to be one of the strongest heroes. Why is he constantly on the verge of death? Not only that, but he never saves himself. It's always his dog or someone else that comes in at the last second. I feel like they got so carried away with trying to make him more human that they forgot he was nearly invincible. Also, I need to talk about this one part of the movie, but it is a little bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear it, just skip a little bit ahead. So throughout the film, he keeps getting beat up by this villain, and it turns out the villain is actually a clone of himself, which just doesn't make sense. The clone is being controlled by the evil scientist who has like studied his movements, but why wouldn't Superman be able to counter it and beat it? Do you get what I'm saying? Why is he being beat up by a version of himself? Shouldn't he be the smarter one, considering he knows himself better? I haven't seen anyone talk about it, so please let me know if you also noticed it. Going back to some of the positives, I really thought the casting of this movie was solid, with David Corenswet being such a perfect Superman. He looked the part, he had the right energy, and there were those little moments where I thought, okay, yeah, I believe this guy would save a cat from a tree. The supporting cast had some standout performances as well, with characters like Lois Lane. There was actual chemistry between them, and not many superhero movies these days can say the same. I also have to give a shout out to Mr. Terrific, because I honestly thought he was the most interesting and entertaining characters in the entire movie. So yeah, of course I thought there were some good moments, but I just feel like they were completely overshadowed by these really dodgy parts. I'm mainly talking about these out-of-the-world, goofy flying scenes that were a CGI nightmare. I don't know where this film's budget went, because you could literally get the same effects at the Harry Potter studio tour. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. Now, let's move on to the aspect that everyone is talking about, and that is the color grading. At the start of the film, I really loved the use of all the bright colors, and it was so nice to finally see a Superman existing in a world that didn't hate the sun. But here's where things get tricky, because as the movie went on, I can't lie, but something about it just felt weirdly artificial. It had this overproduced, almost video gamey quality to it. Not quite uncanny, but it was definitely lacking that texture and weight that makes a world feel real. This was really noticeable in the fight scene with that huge monster. It literally looked more like a boss fight from a video game. It's like they fixed the lighting, but they forgot to fix the deeper thing hiding beneath it, and that's why I think it didn't click with a lot of people. Because beyond the aesthetics, this Superman ended up feeling like, well, every other superhero movie. Big CGI battles, an overstuffed third act, rushed emotional arcs, and a villain who felt more like a plot device than a person. I just kept waiting for the movie to surprise me, to hit me with something bold or weird or unexpected, but it just never did. It played things so safe, which is bizarre because Superman is like the one hero who doesn't have to play things safe anymore. I feel like that could be because of James Gunn's history with directing Marvel movies. I just feel like he brought those techniques to this movie and it made it feel kind of the same, but just a slightly worse version. Am I the only one who thinks Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was levels better than Superman? If anything, I feel like it should have leaned into that style a little harder, because in trying to be so serious, it just ended up feeling really goofy. This was supposed to be DC's chance to reset the board, to show us something new, but instead, it just blended in. Look, I do understand that this movie is supposed to be the setup for the new phase of the DCU, and there's gonna be a lot more movies to come. And of course, as the universe grows, the hype is gonna grow alongside it, just like Marvel, so there is hope in that. But as a standalone movie, I'm sorry, but I just don't feel like it lived up to people's expectations. And I feel like that's the most disappointing part. Not that it was bad, because it wasn't. It was perfectly watchable, occasionally even charming, but it's forgettable. And when you're rebooting one of the most iconic characters of all time and creating this new world around it, forgettable is probably the worst thing you could be. It just arrived, played its part, and now everyone's already moving on. And I don't think that's the actor's fault or the director's necessarily. I just think it's that superhero fatigue creeping in again, which is exactly why I don't have much hope for Fantastic Four. Despite how good it looks, I just don't know if it can beat the superhero fatigue. But there is no doubt that Marvel is trying their absolute hardest, because the marketing for this movie is insane. I mean, it is everywhere. But Superman was also heavily marketed, and yet it underperformed at the box office, so it is really hard to tell. I also think that casting Pedro Pascal as the lead isn't helping anyone, considering everyone is so sick and tired of seeing his face. Seriously, why is he in everything? So Marvel keeps saying that Fantastic Four is going to be the new cornerstone of the MCU, that this franchise will get people hyped again, but is it? We've barely gotten over the mess of Phase 4 and 5 with all their half-baked Disney Plus shows, underwhelming films, and crazy storylines. There is no foundation anymore, no sense of momentum, so how are people supposed to latch onto this? Marvel is in this really weird identity crisis right now, where they don't know if they should go back to basics or lean more into the multiverse and sci-fi chaos. The Fantastic Four, as characters, don't fit neatly into either of those categories. They're not street-level heroes like Spider-Man, they're not gods like Thor. They're a weird, sciencey family who argue in space and fight cosmic villains. If we were in prime Marvel right now, I really don't think this would work, but the more I think about it, the more I think that this is exactly what Marvel need. I really do think that if this is as good as it looks, then maybe it could revive the franchise. I don't know, I just feel like there's a big possibility with everything building up to the new Avengers Doomsday. Could this be the new revival, or are people just done with superhero films forever? Which I really hope isn't the case, because one thing that really frustrates me about this fatigue is that it punishes movies that actually try to be different. Take Thunderbolts for example, which was absolutely fantastic. It wasn't just another big, loud, save the world blockbuster, it was more grounded, more character driven, and it basically answered the question of what would happen if superheroes suffered with mental illness. It's such an interesting concept, and I think it worked so well, and I'm just so disappointed that more people didn't go and see it. It's like audiences are so tired of the same formula that they push away projects that they assume will just be like all the rest, even though some of them are trying to be different. But I know it's hard, it is so hard given Marvel's recent track history that people just don't care anymore to see whether it's good or not. They've just given up. So where does that leave us? Are superhero movies dead? No, I don't think so. This fatigue in Hollywood isn't new, it's just the natural cycle of pop culture. Western movies went through it, musicals, pirate movies, every genre that dominates eventually hits its saturation point. The difference is, superhero movies lasted so long and made so much money that Hollywood convinced itself they were immune. They assumed audiences would keep showing up no matter how repetitive, no matter how formulaic, no matter how hollow it all started to feel. But people can't be tricked into caring forever. Eventually, even the most loyal fans will hit their limit. The box office numbers reflect that, the overseas market reflects that, and honestly, our own exhaustion reflects it. We've been force-fed so much content that feels like the only reason it exists is to keep a franchise alive. And yet, in saying that, I don't think audiences are done with superhero movies, I just think they're done with bad ones. They're done with lazy writing, predictable plots, and recycled characters. But if someone came along and made something genuinely fresh, heartfelt, and exciting, people will show up, and I really do believe that. Just look at Guardians of the Galaxy 3 or Spider-Man No Way Home, and even movies like The Joker. Every one of these films had that excitement and hype, which I really think comes down to the fact that they showed us something different. So no, superhero movies aren't dead, they are just quietly resting, but honestly, I feel like this era of flops and failures is actually exactly what the genre needed to revive itself. I have hope for this new chapter of DC, and I have hope for this new phase of Marvel, I really do. All they need to do is tell a story that matters and make people feel something. Because I think if studios can figure that out, if they finally give us something worth watching, I think people are ready to start caring again. I know I'm ready, I'm just waiting for a good reason. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I want to know your thoughts down below, especially what you think the best Marvel movie was past 2019. Let me know. For me, hands down, it has to be Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and there is no competition there. And if you made it this far, comment the word Groot so we can confuse the people who have short attention spans. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I see all your support and I am so grateful. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!